Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, another podcast recap episode from 579 up through 598. So roughly the last 4 weeks of daily podcasts, except for Sunday. Thanks sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins & Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentications, all under Beckett.com. 579, titled it Strong Hobby Friendships with my Panini friends, because I do have friends at Panini, used to work for our company, great guys, and they had lost our good friend and colleague, Ben Eckler, quite suddenly, and I wanted to connect with those guys about that, as well as just what makes for such strong hobby friendships, mainly among men who are in the trenches together. So there's a lot of that in this hobby. Those were great guys, and Ben is truly missed, but we wanted to take a positive tone on just reaching out and being friendly, and we're all in this together, and a team sport. Even if you collect by yourself, you're seeing a lot of the same people, and again, we miss Ben, but thanks guys for contributing your insights about friendship in the hobby. 579A was the 7 listener questions. Just keep them coming. Don't get discouraged if I don't respond to them right away. I just accumulate a bunch, and then that's why it's titled 7 listener questions. 3.0, that's for my reference, that the episodes aren't all titled the same. But again, thanks for your questions. Really appreciate them. drjamesbeckett@gmail.com. 579B was the Instagram questions. It was a whole bunch of questions, but they really dovetailed into conflicts of interest. What's going on is that there are influencers in the industry, of which certainly I was one, our company was one. If you're an influencer in the industry, in the hobby, transparency may not be it. If you're active in the market and then you're telling people, even though that's fully transparent, it may still be a conflict because you could be moving the market. So transparency may not be enough, and each entity needs to have their own policies. We certainly had ours, but it's to each their own. You just need to patronize who you want to patronize and listen to who you want to listen to. And if you had a multitude of voices you're listening to, hopefully you can sift through and figure out what's right for you, not just because one person said to do it. 580 was the recap. 581, Brad Bethune was, I think he was over here that time. I just have Rich and others over here sometimes. We're having my cards, and we can sort cards, look at cards, and talk about cards. But Brad had accumulated a bunch of questions for Rich and me, so that's one of the few times I have questions for Rich and me. And Rich and I can tag team that, and Brad was all in fun. It was a good time. 582 was my interview with Blake Grice. Blake Down, his podcast, YouTube channel. Amazing young man, 9.5 years old. All things Topps Project 70. The mix of the art and the car. Enjoyed talking to him. Again, that was fun to be going back and forth with a 9.5-year-old. I was impressed and certainly enjoyed getting to know Blake a little bit. 583 was outtakes from John Keating's actual show. It's that 70s card show, which he does a lot. It's just really about the 70s. So listen to his show to get the whole thing, but this was just part of it that I thought would be interesting because he has a way of questioning or the dialogue about the 70s, going deep. That's fun. 70s were a great decade for me. 584 was the dueling questions, my third stint with Steve Grad, Pawn Stars fame, as well as lead authenticator at Beckett Authenticated. He's insightful. We had separate paths in the hobby. In one sense, I'm older than he is, and he was affiliated with other companies before he came under the Beckett umbrella. But I was a very serious autograph collector back in the 70s. Gave it up when I got into price guides, but I was buying autograph collections, and I wasn't necessarily an authenticator. I had an eye, at least at some level, to see if something was obviously bad, but bought a lot of collections and collected, and I loved getting autographed rookie cards. Was I decades ahead of my time? I don't know. I just think it's an appealing thing to do. Thanks, Steve, for your insightful questions. 585 was the dollar box episode with just looking at football. And I've told people I don't do a lot of basketball dollar box because it's just mostly shiny stuff that I don't do it that way. So I'm mainly looking for a little bit older, where there's more of an established market than this year's cards or last year's cards or a couple years ago. I approach basketball in a little different way. But football and baseball, football is actually more fun for me because, again, just another insight here, is that when I go through the baseball dollar boxes, it's just there's a lot of failed prospect, Bowman Chrome, Topps. It's not like some of them aren't decent perhaps for $1, but you've got to sift through a lot. Whereas football, you're going to see a mix of players. There's so many in there that I only got through 4 letters in my 15-minute limit. Thank you, all you dollar box dealers. You provide a lot of enjoyment for me and many others who like to dig in there. And again, like I said, I'm disclosing now. I'm so into football that I can only deal with 4 letters, and I'll keep going if you want me to. 586 was another episode with John Keating, but this was him asking me questions. We did that before a few months ago, and it was a lot of fun. He just asked me questions that other people don't, but this was my show, and so not outtakes from his. And again, he's a baseball guy, so I was too. The 70s, as I said, were a great decade. 587 were the outtakes on the Cloud 259 podcast Bren Jones does. It's on track and field. But he's a collector. He said, hey, I'd like to interview you, actually. And I said, well, I'll do that if you'll let me simulcast or record as well. So we went his, and then I broke it up. Actually, you can see I broke it up into 2 episodes. But he's saying, why not track cards? And I'm saying, I agree. Why not? There's not as much of a team orientation, but there's a very strong national orientation of what country, more so than what team they run on or whatever. That was enjoyable to draw parallels between what's going on with track and track cards. 588 was the basketball dueling questions with Kyle from the Wax Museum. When I get into a conversation with Kyle, I'm trying to figure out this inside joke, but I'm trying to figure out who's the teacher and who's the student. I think Kyle is absolutely a teacher, and sometimes I'm a teacher too, but I think he loves to learn. I love to learn. Probably took turns being teacher and student as we batted around our basketball dueling questions. 589 was the outtakes from Hobby Hotline back in early October 9th. Again, in all these outtake episodes, you just go to the original episode. I'm not editing to twist anything. I'm just abridging to what I think would be important for me to build the records. Part of that, we took off in that particular Hobby Hotline. There was a question about, at that point in time, what would happen with potential vaccine being available for kids. Is that going to be a positive or a negative? Well, I'm hard-pressed to see how it's a negative, but I don't think kids are the primary group that are being affected by COVID, which I hope is playing out at this point. That's certainly my hope and my prayer. But whether it is or isn't, it's nice to know that kids have some natural immunity, and there's scientists who believe that natural immunity will be enhanced by the vaccine, I guess, at an appropriate dosage. 590 was a fascinating episode. First time we really have had a chance to do this, but Rich told me he'd gotten some information from Mike Kramer straight from the horse's mouth, of the founder of Pacific Trading Cards. He had some spreadsheets from several years, and we pulled out 3 that we could go over and do in an episode on 98 Pacific baseball products. There was Pacific, Omega, and Paramount. So the 3 different sets. I was shocked that they were similar in their quantity produced. I think it's smaller than a lot of these, and you don't see a ton of those out there. Again, Pacific was not the most heavily marketed brand, but they had their own printing press. We'll do another episode because we've also got some football data and some hockey data, and we'll do them. When we do those, you may want to refer back to episode 590 to see that Pacific was doing 15 million baseball cards per brand. That's just not very much. 591 was the episode with Rich, just a whimsical, free is not always free, motivated by several things. Some of the cards that I have that are free now, I bought in dollar boxes. So I made a poor choice. I bought something that really, I overestimated the demand, can't sell it. So it's almost going to be free or near free when I'm discarding something, even if I paid more for it. But I'm trying to have episodes that don't all deal with the high end of the hobby. This is probably more toward the low end of the hobby, obviously. Free or close to free. We're talking about cards for kids. We're talking about Rich's donations for his synagogue show, all that. But free is not always free, and we unpack that in a lot of ways. And again, thanks, Rich, for finishing my sentences sometimes, or allowing me to interrupt you, or to amplify something that we both have experienced and enjoyed. 592 was the outtakes on track cards, more from Bren Jones. One of the things I threw at him is that when we were hiring people, or the conventional wisdom when you're hiring people for jobs for a grader, if I was going to hire a grader, if they were a marathoner or a distance runner or a hurdler, to me that's better than a sprinter. It's somebody that understands the grind of the training and the long races and the grueling races. As I've said, to find a grader who can grade for an hour or two and do a great job, there may be a lot of those out there, but somebody that can grade every day for 8 hours with an occasional break, again, that's just a special skill. And to me, it's akin to some of these intense track marathon, maybe even ultra marathoners, Ironman kinds of things. 593 was the outtakes on investment grade from Mike Moynihan. I actually went over to his house. He was a great host. He's got the beast over there. I got a chance to see the beast up close and have some drawers pulled out. And we went through some cards. And the question came, well, what is investment grade? And he was trying to come up with a number, and you just have to listen to the episode. I don't know if that's both on his Baseball Collector YouTube channel and Golden Age podcast, but those are the platforms that he uses. But I was pushing back that investment grade is not necessarily a number. He showed me a 1.5 that I thought looked really good. And then he showed me a 1 that looked really good. Is that investment grade? I think it is. They were high-end cards. that were tough to find, and you're not going to find 10s of what he was talking about. You're hardly going to find a 9. And so whether it's a 5, 6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1, if it presents pretty well. So he's all about that, and I encourage you to follow him and listen to that episode if you're interested in that. 594 was the dueling questions with Jacob Burris, another precocious 13-year-old. He's got Sports Card Second, his own channel, and I was on his, again, another kind of a simulcast. I said, if I'm going to be on yours and you're going to be on mine, why don't we just do dueling questions, and you can use that and put in your intro, and I'll do the same. And so, again, very sharp young man. If there's a bunch more Jacobs out there and Brody's, then the hobby will be in good hands in a few decades, even now. 595, disincentives to sell. Jason Granite, Wall Street guy. His issue was, when you're producing these cards, they're to be sold and not to be sold and put away, but they're to be, fully integrated into the market and not just stored unopened to sell later. It gets tricky on what the demand is. If the companies produce a bunch of cards and they don't all get opened and put into the marketplace. Like I've said, if it's 10%, no problem. But in some cases, it may be more. And that came back and bit people in the late 80s, early 90s. 596 was Sports Card Hobby Vaults with Rich. I'd been thinking about this for a long time. I said, Rich, let's talk about vaults. If we do the broadest definition possible of a vault, there are many vaults out there. There's many vaults, and I have more than one vault. In a sense, I have a vault of my cards at ComC. They're mine. I can look at them digitally. They're not the highest end cards, but they're cards that are still mine, and they're safely protected there. I have cards at the bank in a bank vault. Again, it's across town. It's more than one place, but I can go visit my cards that way. But we're just talking about the psychology of vaults. I think vaults are here to stay, and a vault that has a multi-business purpose. It could wind up saving you insurance. And if it's an avenue for having a platform for a fixed price sale or easily putting into auction, I think that's an idea that makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. 597, outtakes on top tier quarterbacks, motivated by a question on Hobby Outline that is about Dak. And I said, I think Dak is not in the top tier quarterback. He's in the second tier. Then the next thing, Dak is injured. I don't think he's extremely injured, but when he was out, the Cowboys won without him. Okay, that's not a compliment. It's a compliment to the Cowboys, but Dak is an important part of the Cowboys. But they were able to win without him with Cooper Rush. Finally, 598, the private equity inquiry. I've always wondered about this. This is like you hear one half of the conversation because the other half of the conversation was deleted. I wanted this to be an anonymous inquiry from a couple of sharp guys. You're only hearing half of the conversation and you're not hearing the questions. So you've got to imagine what the question is. It jumps around a little bit, but I try to be helpful. But I thought some of that thought process might be enjoyable to some of you. So that's it for these last 20 episodes. Thanks everybody for listening. I'll be back again tomorrow with another episode.